So, picture this. January 3rd, 2026. The world wakes up to absolutely stunning news. The U.S. military has launched a full-scale operation in Venezuela, and they've captured the president. It's a huge deal. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly what went down and, maybe more importantly, get into the why.
To really get the scale of this, you have to try and imagine being there. This quote, it just hits you, right? A witness in Caracas in the middle of the night. The whole ground shook. This wasn't some abstract political move on a chessboard. For millions of people, this was a sudden, violent, and absolutely terrifying reality.
Okay, so here are the cold, hard facts. In the dead of night, January 3rd, U.S. forces hit multiple targets across Venezuela. And the main objective? The capture of President Nicolas Maduro and the First Lady, Celia Flores. This was a lightning-fast, decisive operation that completely redrew the political map of the region literally overnight.
And this wasn't a small-scale raid. We're talking about a coordinated strike. People on the ground reported at least 7 major explosions rocking the capital city around 2 in the morning. Targets weren't just in one place. They were spread across 4 different states. It plunged Caracas into darkness with massive power outages. And Maduro himself, he was swiftly taken out of the country, put on a U.S. warship, and pointed toward a courtroom in New York.
All of this, of course, leads to the billion-dollar question. Why? Why do this now? An operation this massive doesn't just happen on a whim. The U.S. administration was very clear in laying out its official reasons for this incredible move. So, let's break down their justifications.
The thing is, the events of January 3rd didn't happen in a vacuum. This was the final move after a full year of escalating pressure. It all really kicked off in early 2025, when the U.S. took a huge step and designated Venezuelan cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That was the legal groundwork. Then, by December, things got physical with a U.S. Navy blockade of oil tankers, squeezing the economy hard. The military strike, you see, was the climax of that whole strategy.
The Trump administration's public case was built on 4 main pillars. First, and this was the big one, fighting the drug trade. Second, securing Venezuela's massive oil reserves. Third, plain and simple, regime change. And fourth, tying it all back home, boosting U.S. border security. Let's dig into each of these a little more.
Okay, so the main reason, the one you heard about the most, was this idea of narco-terrorism. The administration essentially painted President Maduro as a drug kingpin. They accused him of running a massive criminal enterprise that was flooding the United States with cocaine. Remember that earlier designation of cartels like Tren de Aragua as terrorist groups? Well, that was the key. It provided the legal framework that allowed for this kind of military act.
And then, there's the oil. You just can't talk about Venezuela without talking about oil. We're talking about the largest proven oil reserves on the entire planet. And the U.S. administration wasn't shy about it. They stated very publicly that they would be very strongly involved in managing that industry after the intervention. That points to a huge strategic and, of course, economic motivation.
Beyond the drugs and oil, there were these much bigger, long-term foreign policy goals. For years, the U.S. had viewed Maduro's government as illegitimate, so getting him out was a clear objective. But this was also framed as a modern revival of the Monroe Doctrine. That's the nearly 200-year-old U.S. policy that basically says the Americas are America's backyard. Bringing that up now is a massive signal to rivals like China and Russia. And finally, they tied it all to a domestic issue, arguing that breaking up these gangs would help slow down mass migration at the U.S. border.
Now, as you can probably guess, a move this bold sent shockwaves around the globe. The reaction was instant, it was intense, and boy, was it divided. The world basically split right down the middle on this.
And this slide really paints the picture. Look at the split. In one corner, you've got absolute condemnation. China called it a hegemonic act. Russia called it armed aggression. Even Venezuela's next-door neighbor, Colombia, called it state terrorism. But then in the other corner, the response was much more cautious, even supportive. The EU and the UK called for calm and fact-finding, while Italy actually came out and described the US action as legitimate. It's a stark divide.
Digging in a little deeper, you can really see the different anxieties at play. Russia immediately demanded to know where Maduro was. Neighbors like Colombia weren't just condemning it, they were expressing outrage and alarm. And for a country like Cuba, a longtime Maduro ally, this was terrifying. They feared this was the start of a new, aggressive American dominance in the region. This table just perfectly shows that complex web of alliances and fears that this one single action set off.
So, Maduro's captured. The world is arguing, what now? What is the new reality on the ground in Venezuela? That's the question that everyone is asking, and it's what will define the country's future.
Well, the U.S. administration's plan, at least what they've said publicly, is pretty direct. With Maduro on his way to an American court, they've stated that the U.S. will effectively run the country. They plan to oversee a transition until, in their words, Venezuela is put back on track. But wow, think about the complexity of that. This isn't just a simple fix. We're talking about rebuilding a totally shattered economy, trying to unite a deeply divided society, and all while potentially fighting off an insurgency from forces still loyal to Maduro.
And that leaves us with this huge, critical question. The U.S. has presented this as an intervention to fight crime and restore order. But does one country unilaterally deciding to run another set a dangerous new precedent for how we handle global problems in the 21st century? It's more than a legal question. It's about whether an outside power can really put a nation back on track, or if this kind of intervention just risks creating a whole new set of even more volatile problems. And that is the question the entire world is now forced to grapple with.